you think that you're being stalked, don't.
Don't what?
Directed and co-written by Michael Bafaro and starring Kelly Bastard, we are talking about the movie Don't Look Away, also known as Mannequin, although don't be confused with another 2023 horror film called Mannequin as well. So Don't Look Away, it's actually a very creepy and quite freaky movie in some ways. In actual fact, I would say this is one of the freakiest movies I've seen in the modern age. And it focuses on this young woman who comes across an accident on the road. And there is a kind of automobile accident because of a robbery. And ultimately there's this kind of mannequin that's getting transported. And she kind of sees it. And then she kind of starts sort of seeing it everywhere in whatever area she's kind of looking. And their friends start to see it as well. And then they start dying horribly. And it is apparently some type of entity where you kind of, once you have seen it, you can't kind of stop seeing it. And ultimately it will kind of kill you, for lack of a better word. That's the kind of the very kind of basic premise here. I would say this is a very similar movie in some ways to the film It Follows. I mean, it doesn't follow exactly that, if you get my pun there, but it's a similar film in some ways. It's a comparable piece. If you liked It Follows, I think you might like this one. So let's discuss what I think works. Like I've said, this one is a pretty creepy film. I think you'll be quite creeped out. This film largely is about a building up the kind of like this off-kilter kind of atmosphere that it kind of tries to kind of permeate through the screen. And I think it does a great job of it because you're not quite sure what you're looking at. This mannequin is pretty kind of like, in some ways mundane. It's, you know, it's a mannequin. It's not anything like made overtly scary, but it kind of looks you know, a little bit menacing, you might say. It's kind of facial expressions and things like that. And it's not like it's a kind of a slasher where this thing is like a mannequin that's alive and it's sort of killing you and things like that. In actual fact, you only ever see it in a kind of a static position, but it kind of is there, and then when you look back it's gone, and then it's somewhere else and things like this. And ultimately it's the kind of suggestion that there's some type of presence there that is sort of incorporated into this kind of like this body of this mannequin that is the freakiest thing. And this movie does a great job of really selling that to you because it's so kind of like off kilter and kind of like bizarre and kind of unnatural looking. It just kind of it ends up being a pretty freaky movie. It also has some interesting stylistic choices. Now, there is a reasonable amount of people that die in this movie, but you don't actually see the kills because obviously you're not seeing the mannequin move around. It kills people somehow, but you don't know why or how it's doing it. But you'll see like the aftermath. So, for example, there'll be, you know, someone will go into a doorway and then you'll hear a scream and then they'll come out and their head will be kind of like, you know, there'll just be like a headless body like flapping around and things like this. So there is gore in it, but it deliberately doesn't show you the kills. It just kind of shows you the kind of the after effects, the aftermath of what this kind of entity has done in killing various kind of people in kind of gruesome fashion. And because you're not seeing it, it's one of these films where I think, you know, some people complain about lack of on-screen kills, but I think this does a good job of. It'll look maybe silly having this thing kind of move around and stuff and chopping people's heads off or however it does it, because you don't know. But it makes your imagination kind of fill in the blanks. But there's enough of this kind of unsettling visuals that you do see, I think, to keep you satisfied. So I think the movie does a great job of that. The film has a kind of dreamlike quality to it, the best way I would kind of describe it. For example, it's a very kind of like odd in the way that it's the time frame is set. It's clearly kind of filmed in the modern era because we have laptops, we have mobile phones and things like this. People are talking about creepypastas and things. But then there'll be certain stylistic choices that will kind of be a bit more kind of retro feeling. The way people dress, kind of like, you know, rotary kind of landlines and things like this that other people have. Give it a kind of like a vintage kind of early 80s, 70s kind of vibe to it. But it is obviously set in the modern age with kind of modern amenities. So, but it has that kind of, ultimately a somewhat of a retro feel to it, which gives it this kind of quite strong visual kind of style, if that makes sense. And even kind of when we see some of the kind of the shots and stuff, they're kind of filmed in a sort of sometimes like a soft focus that gives it this kind of, as I say, like a dreamlike kind of vibe to it, which all makes it seem sort of, you know, a little bit kind of surreal at times, and like, you know, you're not quite sure what it's going. Now, I want to emphasise that the movie is not a confusing film. The narrative, I think, is relatively strong, and I think that it kind of, you know, it's an easy film to follow in regards to a narrative thread, but its kind of visuals gives it this kind of more of a, just a surreal visual kind of feel to it. But, you know, you can follow the story and follow the impact that this thing is having on these kind of characters and things like that. There are some genuinely creepy moments in this film, and I have to say that the directors here and the film crew do a great job of creating some pretty interesting kind of scary moments. I mean, there'll just be sometimes a flash of an instant where the camera will pan across, and you'll just kind of see this sort of silhouette of this kind of mannequin, and it will go back and it'll be gone and things like that. But there's quite a lot of it, so it's not like you're hardly kind of seeing it. So as I mentioned, if you like It Follows, then I would strongly suggest checking this movie out, because I think it's a very good companion piece. It Follows, I think, was a slightly more polished film than this one, but it's a similar film in so many ways in regards to kind of stylistic choices and tone. I think fans of that one probably would enjoy this. What could I say on the negative points? I have to be honest with you, the first third of this movie, the first act, I was like, damn, this is like, I can't think of any faults in this first act of this movie. I was like, my God, this is going to be like such a high score. But I will say, as the movie goes on, I think it got a little bit kind of like, not quite as fresh is the best way I would describe it. There's a number of elements to that. The first act of the movie, we don't focus on so many characters. We only get like our main kind of girl, played by Bastard, and you know, a kind of smattering of other characters. When we're kind of more introduced to her wider sort of circle of friends, I have to say the acting is a little bit of a mixed bag, you might say. So yeah, I think some of the kind of the performances are not realistic. Let me just put it like that. I would also say I think the writing makes these characters not particularly kind of realistic either. So I think acting wise, certainly our main characters do a good job, but there are ones that I feel the acting is a little subpar. And the way these characters are written, they don't really feel like you're looking at sort of genuine kind of reactions to things. They're kind of, it almost goes into, like I said, about that kind of dreamlike way these kind of characters are written. They seem slightly kind of like not quite how real people would be. There's more of like a stylized version, so slightly kind of off kilter and things. Which again, I just found myself not being able to connect with these characters just on the you know, as the kind of the film goes on. Because I do feel the first maybe half, probably more like a third of the film, I was kind of fully invested in these sort of characters, but not quite as much as we go through the film. I do think it gets a little bit kind of silly at times with some of the kind of the again kind of plots involving these particular kind of characters. I wasn't quite buying it as much as the kind of the film goes on. It just doesn't quite seem quite as it doesn't draw you in as much as I think it does in the kind of that initial kind of part of the movie. It just seems a little bit more sillier as the kind of the film kind of goes on to a certain degree. I think the ending is fine, but it's kind of pretty typical of a movie like this. I don't think it really breaks the mold, if you like. I mean, when it comes to an ending like this, and you know, it's very much of a one note through the film in regards to its kind of story wise. There's not much more to it, but it's a solid horror film. If you like creepy movies, if you like ones that are gonna make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, make you a little bit freaky, I think you'll probably get a big kick out of this film. Certainly in the first half. I think as the movie goes on, it loses a little bit of that kind of factor, because I just think it gets a little bit sillier and the performances aren't quite as strong. It's still a decent second half of the movie, but it's just not, I wouldn't say it doesn't kind of like really excel in any particular way then. But it's certainly worth a watch. I enjoyed this one quite a lot, and I think it will hit the spot for many horror fans. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.